We need to do it. Frankly, it's shameful that we haven't.
2 years ago.
But we should have done it 2 years ago.
Senator McCain, it sounds like you're more on board with a limited strike than you might have been when you walked into this meeting. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment. I think it's a fair assessment to say that we still have significant concerns, but we believe that there is in formulation a strategy to upgrade the capabilities of the Free Syrian Army and to degrade the capabilities of Bashar Assad. Before this meeting, we had not had that indication. Now it's a question whether that will be put into a concrete strategy that we can sell to our colleagues and that we could agree with.
Senator McCain, we've heard a lot of Republicans and Democrats coming out of these, especially yesterday's briefing, very skeptical about this. How hard is the president going to have to work to get this resolution passed?
I think they're going to have to work very hard. Americans are skeptical. We've gone for 2.5 years without helping these people. Obviously, people are weary after Iraq and Afghanistan. Americans have to be assured that the whole plan will entail American boots on the ground, and we totally are in agreement with that. So they have a selling job to do. But at the same time, I believe that if we can formulate this strategy that I just articulated, degrading his Bashar Assad's capability, upgrading the resistance in the long term, then I think that that we have a chance of succeeding in the vote.
The bottom line on the stakes here, if Congress were to reject this?
If the Congress were to reject a resolution like this, after the President of the United States has already committed to action, the consequences would be catastrophic in that the credibility of this country with friends and enemy and adversaries alike would be shredded, and there would be not only implications for this presidency but for future presidencies as well.
The president really has no one to blame in many ways but himself about the lack of public understanding of what's at stake in Syria. And we talked about the past, the present, and the future. 2 years ago, we had an opportunity to get Assad out when there were dozens of al-Qaeda only in Syria. Now there's thousands. A year from now, there are going to be tens of thousands. 2 years ago, there were not 600,000 refugees in Jordan, compromising the king of Jordan. Time is not on our side, so we urge the president to up his game and inform the American people, what does it mean if Assad wins and the opposition loses? What does it mean if Assad, with the backing of the Iranians and the Russians, win after we say Assad's got to go? The Russians and the Iranians are all in. I finally see an effort by this administration to counter. At the end of the day, this is a Syrian fight, but the outcome does not limit itself to Syria. If we don't get Syria right, good luck convincing the Iranians of changing their behavior. So we let it be known to the president that we don't want endless war. John knows better than anybody, war is a terrible thing. We want sustainable security. And Syria is a cancer that's growing in the region. And for 2 years, the president has allowed this to become, quite frankly, a debacle. And when it comes to selling the American people what we should do in Syria, given the indifference and, quite frankly, contradictions, it's going to be a tough sell, but it is not too late. So, Mr. President, clear the air. Be decisive, be firm about why it matters to us as a nation to get Syria right. I'm going to go back home to South Carolina and, one, listen to the people, but give them what happens if we do nothing, what happens if we have a weak response, and what happens if we get Syria right.
Senator, what do you want to see?
And a weak response is almost as bad as doing nothing.
Are you both, Senator McCain, so bottom line, Senator McCain, is what you heard today from the president sufficient for you and Senator Graham to go out and try to gain support for the president's plan from other members of the Senate and Congress?
I think it's encouraging, but we have to have concrete plans, we have to have concrete details, and we have to be assured that this is a dramatic difference from the last 2 years of a policy of neglect which has led to the deaths of 100,000 people, 1 million refugees, 1 million children refugees, and a spreading of this conflict to the region.
Are you satisfied that the timeline is of no consequence? This can take
I am not satisfied the timeline is of no consequence, and I'm astounded when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says it doesn't matter. Anybody who understands warfare knows that Bashar Assad is moving his assets, military assets, into civilian populations and civilians into military areas. It's much harder now than it would have if we'd acted initially.
Did you discuss the hardening aspect with the president and the potential of a really penetrating blow that could be struck, any strike? I mean, is there confidence that you have at this point?
Those are some of the details that, very frankly, they have not shared with us and probably shouldn't. But we have been given some reason to believe that very serious strikes may take place as opposed to cosmetic. And I say that may because we now need to see a lot of the details.
Well, for the first time, I've got an understanding of what happens the day after the smoke clears. You know, the Israelis don't announce their attacks ahead of time for a reason. You read about it when it's over because that's the best way to affect the outcome militarily. This is pretty bizarre to give the enemy weeks to reconfigure their force, but we are where we are. And a degrading strike, limited in scope to degrade his chemical weapons delivery systems, could have a beneficial effect to the battlefield momentum. There will never be a political settlement in Syria as long as Assad's winning. And I told the president, how do you expect anybody to go to the negotiating table as long as Assad's winning? And if you believe the Syrians will not accept him as part of the new Syria, then he has to go.
Senator, you said that President Obama needs to do a better job of selling this. What do you mean? What does he need to do specifically?
Well, again, articulate a strategy and a plan, which so far has not been there. Simply the statement was that they were going to have some strikes, and specifically categorizing that as not intended to achieve regime change. I strongly disagree with that. And I believe that if we can degrade, as I mentioned, and upgrade, then I think we have a chance. But we need to see that plan. We need to see that strategy articulated. We also have to make it clear that a vote against this would be catastrophic in its consequences, not only as far as this issue is concerned, but in the future.
The president speaks about bringing change to Washington and galvanizing supporters to get Congress to act. Is this a situation where that's not as effective as it might be on other issues?
Well, it's a very tough sell whenever you commit American forces even to limited military involvement. And frankly, there is a credibility gap because of the last 2 years where nothing has happened, while people have been massacred by the thousands, as much as more than 100,000. So there's a credibility gap with some of us who believe that we could have ended this war 2 years ago, when now there is possibly a change in strategy that could bring successful conclusion to this conflict.
Did the president say when, if, or how he would be articulating this strategy to the American
We can't
people?
Talk about that. We can't.
Do you feel your colleagues in Congress agree that it's catastrophic? It would be catastrophic? Do you feel like your colleagues in Congress agree with you, too, that it would be catastrophic for this to fail?
I think that many of my colleagues in Congress have yet to be convinced either way. They need to have the hearings that we're going to have starting tomorrow in the Foreign Relations Committee, and they need to be briefed, and they need to understand, and I'm sure they do, the seriousness of this issue.
Yes, can I just, from our point of view, from the Republican point of view, there's a libertarian wing of our party that I very much respect. That's not going to get, Fortress America, I just don't think will work. But having said that, it is not a mystery to me that most members of Congress are reluctant to engage when it comes to Syria because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't have any idea how this military strike, so limited in focus and nature, is going to change things. What are they going to tell people back home? We shot some missiles, and then what? For the first time, I see the development of a strategy that will upgrade the opposition as well as degrade Assad, that I think if it becomes a reality, we'll know in the next couple of days, that I can believe in my heart will work. And to my colleagues, if you think the outcome in Syria doesn't matter to the United States, then you must really believe the King of Jordan is just somebody else in the Mideast. And if you can't see the connection between Syria and Iran, you're blind at a time when history needs for you to have good eyesight. The connection between Syria and Iran is clear as a bell. To disconnect these two would be a huge foreign policy, national security mistake, and I hope the president, above all else, will make that connection.
Senator, do you have any commitments from the president on how he would, as Senator Graham said, upgrade the opposition? Are there any
Well, I
specifics
mean,
about that?
you use military means to upgrade the opposition.
Senator, you said that it would be a catastrophe if there was a no vote. Doesn't that mean you've really got to vote for the motion?
A weak response is just as bad.
A weak response is something that would give us a serious dilemma, because that would be also catastrophic.
You know, the White House has made it clear that the president doesn't need this authorization to go through with this.
Yep.
Do you think that he really would go ahead with an attack on Syria if Congress rejects?
I think it
this
would be
resolution?
much harder for him to go ahead with any military operation if Congress has already rejected it. He had ample precedent in previous presidents, Republican and Democrat, for acting without the approval of Congress.
Why do you think he did it? Why do you think that this about face did?
You'll have to ask the president, but I think that he found that with the British voting the way they did, and obviously without United Nations approval, as long as the Russians and Chinese are there, that perhaps that a resolution of Congress would give him some more sustainability. And by the way, again, these attacks have to be sustainable. Sustainable to degrade Bashar's capability and to upgrade the Free Syrians Army capability to bring this conflict to an end and Bashar Assad gone. He will only leave when the tide of battle turns against him.
How long is sustainable, Senator? Is it
It depends on the, well, it's harder and harder now because with this delay, Bashar Assad is moving his forces around and making it much more difficult to target them, despite what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs might say. Anyone who knows the military and actions, like Lindsey said, the Israelis and others don't telegraph their intention days, even weeks ahead of time.
If the goal is to have a military strike to degrade the capability of the Assad regime to deliver chemical weapons in the future, that means delivery systems have to be affected. It means the ability to prepare and deliver has to be affected. If that is done in a robust manner, keeping it to the chemical weapons delivery mechanisms, that will have a substantial effect degrading the overall ability of the Assad regime. Simultaneously, you're upgrading the military capability of the opposition, you're upgrading their political cohesion, and you're getting a regional force behind the opposition. These three things together would work, but if the goal of this is to put it in my lap, I welcome a discussion about what we should do. I've been telling you for 2 years what I think, so I welcome the discussion with the President and my colleagues. To those who say in the Congress, Syria is not our business, then you really, honest to God, don't understand the world in which we live in. To the President, if you don't understand that the American people are not going to follow an uncertain trumpet, now's the time for you to reshape public opinion and world opinion. Take advantage of it. Tell us without any hesitation, Mr. President, what does it matter to us as a nation if this war goes on and Assad wins? I believe the President's capable of doing that, has not yet done it, but he is ready to do it. And if he's ready to do that part, I'm ready to go to my colleagues in the Congress and say, now's the time for us to come together before it's too late.
Are you confident that upgrading the opposition doesn't mean supporting groups with links to al-Qaeda that could ultimately use those weapons against us?
I am totally, completely, 100% confident that we know who the Free Syrian Army is. We know what they need. They are the preponderant force still fighting against Bashar Assad, while al-Nusra and some of these other and al-Qaeda groups are spending their time trying to impose Sharia law. There's a definite geographic division between them. We know who they are. If they had a safe area, we would know exactly how to get these weapons to them. The Saudis have provided weapons. They have gotten to the right people. And those who say that we don't know who the opposition are, they're either not telling the truth and they know the truth, or they're badly mistaken. Could I find
working your Republican colleagues?
Oh, I think starting tomorrow we're going to have hearing in the Foreign Relations Committee.
But you personally?
Oh, I'm already talking to a lot of my colleagues. But before I can persuade them to support this, I have to be persuaded. And I'm saying that the President I think made sense in a lot of things he had to say, but we're a long way from